Hello everyone, Salima here and welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about something that always brings a little life to my face, blush. Specifically, we are exploring all the exciting new powder blush launches in the last couple of months. As always, you will get my straightforward and honest review. We will be swatching, comparing, and really digging into whether these new blushes live up to the hype and if they're worth adding to your collection. Just a couple of quick notes before we jump in. First off, even though we are focusing on the new launches, I will still be bringing in some of those tried and true classic powder blush formulas for comparisons. Sometimes it's the best way to really see how a new formula stacks up, right? Secondly, to keep things organized, I have broken down the blushes by formula type. You can see the categories on the screen. And you will also spot a category called unique formulas. These might not be the brand new blushes, but they're truly exceptional in my book and deserve a mention for anyone who's looking for something a little different. Lastly, if you are as much of a blush enthusiast as I am, I have linked my dedicated blush playlist down below for you guys to explore. Alright, enough chit chat, let's get started. Let's start with the classic powder blushes since I have the most in this category. First up is the super hyped up YSL Make Me Blush, and the packaging is undeniably stunning. I've tried both the satin and the matte finish formulations. The powder itself has a traditional dry texture, which isn't particularly unique, but it's certainly not unpleasant. However, I did experience significant fallout with these. You definitely need to tap off your brush before you even think about putting it on your cheeks. Otherwise, it can get patchy and a bit of a nightmare to blend out. Plus, these blushes are seriously pigmented, so a tiny bit really does go a long way. Let's chat about the satin finish for a second. For me, it was way too shimmery. It felt more like a blush topper, not really a blush on its own. And if you have any texture or dryness on your skin, it just seemed to highlight it, which wasn't ideal. Honestly, for $45, I just wasn't wowed by the formula, no matter how pretty the compact is. But that's just my opinion. If you enjoy a luminous and radiant finish blush without all the obvious shimmer or emphasizing texture, then you need to check out the Gucci Luminous Matte Powder Blushes. The finish is truly luminous without any glitter, so it's super flattering. The formula is also just lovely. It feels creamy, picks up easily, and has hardly any fallout. Plus, you can really build up the color exactly how you want it. I am especially in love with the shade Rosy Beige. It looks so flattering on my complexion. I think even if you have fair or light complexion, this blush will provide a natural looking flush and add a subtle warmth to your complexion without being too pink or too muddy. The matte version of the YSL blush is definitely easier to work with because there's no shimmer. But even then, I still don't think it's worth $45. I have other matte blushes in my collection that give me a similar look for a lot less, like the NARS. I have both the old and the new packaging of their reformulated version. To be fair, the packaging isn't the prettiest. It gets dirty so easily, but the formula, that's where NARS really gets it right for me. Some of the shades are super pigmented, but they have hardly any fallout. Blends like a dream, and they're just so much more user friendly than the YSL blushes. I'm not a huge shimmer fan, right? But my all time favorite NARS blush is Deep Throat. It has this really subtle shimmer that somehow doesn't cling to any texture. It just adds this amazing pop of color that makes my skin look so alive without being overwhelming. It's a classic for a reason. I also really like the shade Behave. It's definitely cooler tone, but on my warm skin, it just gives this beautiful understated flush. I can imagine that it would look more rosy on someone with cool undertones, but in a really natural way. So, overall, with the YSL Make Me Blush, while the packaging is undeniably luxurious, I feel like there are other options out there that offer a better balance of luxury and performance for the price. Alright, let's talk about the Tower 28 matte powder blushes. Now, these remind me of the YSL mattes we just talked about. They've got a lot of fallout, and the pigment, oh boy, it's there. So, you definitely need to go in with a light hand and tap off that brush just like with the YSL. And they both dry down to a nice matte finish on the skin. But here's where Tower 28 has a little something extra for me. The formula feels just a touch creamier than the YSL. Plus, these give this lovely blurring effect on your skin and make everything look smoother. I love that. The wear time is pretty similar to YSL, so I get about 8 to 9 hours without it fading too much. Now, for the price, these are around $22, which is a major difference from the YSL. And honestly, for that price, I am way more willing to put in a little extra effort with the application. It feels like a much better value. I have been reaching for this shade Long Beach Iced Tea constantly. On my warm skin, it turns into this really pretty peachy beige. It gives my face this nice, subtle warmth without looking muddy or overdone. But if you have got cooler undertones, this same color will look like a soft, muted rose. So a little more pink than you see on me. But no matter what your undertones are, if you like that soft, gentle wash of color, Long Beach iced tea is amazing. And I am also really surprised by how much I like this bright pink shade they have. It's so fun and vibrant. You definitely need to be careful with it. A tiny bit goes a long way, but it's going to be absolutely gorgeous for spring and summer. So, overall, with Tower 28, you're not going to get that super fancy packaging like YSL. It's definitely more simple, but the performance is really comparable to the YSL mattes and for a fraction of the price. I'm really liking these a lot. Now, for all of my fellow Chanel enthusiasts out there, let's dive into the newly reformulated Chanel Joe Contrast powder blushes. Oh my god, my French is horrible. As some of you may know already, Chanel quietly reformulated these, and a big change is the removal of talc. When I touch these in the pan, the texture is just pure silk, and that translates beautifully to application. This powder is so finely milled that it practically melts into the skin with minimal blending. It's a dream to work with. The pigmentation is just right. Not so intense that you have to be super careful, but definitely buildable for more impact. And they settle into a lovely matte finish that lasts really well on me. Around 10 hours with just a touch of fading. I love all the shades I got. Rose Petal has beautiful warm undertones. Rose Initial looks more neutral on my skin. And Rose Ruban is this gorgeous, cool, rosy pink, almost like a berry rose. It's such a unique shade in my collection. Overall, I'm really impressed with the reformulation. The texture is beautiful, the blend is effortless, and the wear time is impressive. When you combine with the shades I genuinely enjoy, it makes these reformulated Chanel blushes worth the splurge for me. Now, moving on to another product from Chanel, their Le Beige Healthy Glow Sunkissed Powder in the shade Medium Coral. This one has a similar silky powder feel, but the application is noticeably sheerer, which I personally really appreciate for achieving that effortless, healthy glow. You can definitely build up the color if you want more intensity. It also sets down to a natural skin like finish, unlike the matte look of the Joe Contrast powder blush. The longevity is great, no complaints there. If you're someone who prefers a softer, all over warmth rather than a defined pop of color on the cheeks, and you love that just back from the beach kind of radiance, then the Le Beige Healthy Glow Sunkissed powder is definitely worth checking out. It's all about creating that subtle sun kiss effect. Oh, and this smells like jasmine, but the Joe Contrast powder blush smells like roses. I don't know if that's important, but they both have a floral scent. It's not overpowering, but you do get a little floral whiff during application. Now, since we have just touched on some face palettes, I wanted to briefly share my thoughts on the Charlotte Tilbury Soulmates palette. This one is limited edition release, so it might not be around forever. But if you're still planning to grab it, here's my 2 cents. Interestingly, the blush in this palette reminds me quite a bit of the YSL powder blushes we discussed earlier. It has that same drier, almost powdery feel when you touch it in the pan. However, unlike the YSL, this blush isn't crazy pigmented. There's barely any kickback in the pan, and I find it blends onto my skin easily. I haven't noticed any patchiness. It doesn't cling to any dry patches or emphasize texture, which is a big deal for me. If you're familiar with the Charlotte Tilbury cheek to cheek blush formula, this feels very similar, just without that shimmer. I absolutely adore the flawless finish powder in this palette, but since we're strictly talking about blushes today, I won't gush about it. But trust me, it's fantastic. I will link my full review of this palette down below if you are curious. Honestly, I wish they would release this powder in more shades beyond just pink and peach. Finally, the last palette or blush duo I wanted to share in this video is the Westman Atelier Baby Cheeks Powder Duo. I have it in the shade Sable and Suede, which is a blush duo, and Truffle and Tulle, which is a contour duo. This is another one of those powders with a creamy smoothness instead of a dry and dusty feel to it. It has moderate color payoff, so it's not too sheer, but not too bold either. There is the tiniest bit of a fallout when you swirl your brush, but it just melts onto the skin and creates an airbrush effect. The blush duo in Sable and Suede is incredibly versatile for me because I can use the shade Suede in the same way I would a bronzer to add definition to my complexion. It's a warm tawny shade with peachy undertones, and then I use Sable to add a pop of color to my cheeks. I was less impressed with the Tulle and Truffle duo simply because this cool tone pink isn't the kind of blush that I tend to reach for often. I can make it work. It doesn't have a white base pigment, so even if you have warm undertones, it will not create a stark contrast. But considering truffle has so much warmth to it, I don't understand why they would pair it with a cool tone blush. Of course, color preference is subjective, but regardless, the formula is great. I have compared it to so many different blushes in my collection. You can see all the brands on the screen. I will link my video down in the description box if you are interested. But in this video, I wanted to compare it to some newer blush formulas. And I think these blushes are similar to Chanel Joe Contrast Powder Blush. You guys have to excuse me for my French. Both of them have buildable formulas. They aren't going to provide an intense, immediate pigmentation. They blend seamlessly into the skin. However, when I wore them side by side, I noticed that the Westman Atelier looks more matte than Chanel side. Chanel has more of a soft matte finish, whereas the Westman Atelier looks like a true matte. Also, Westman Atelier has a blurring effect on the skin that I didn't notice with Chanel. And lastly, Westman Atelier is fragrance free while Chanel has a floral scent. So if you're sensitive to fragrance, you will like the Westman Atelier. In terms of the versatility of the palette, if I have to pick between the Chanel Le Beige and the Westman Atelier, I would definitely lean towards the Chanel Le Beige. I mean, when you look at the medium coral palette, you can tell that it has a cohesive color story. All three shades are designed to work together seamlessly to create that warm, sun kissed effect across the entire face. The bronzer, blush, and highlighter, even if subtle, all contribute to this unified color story. The Westman Atelier Tulle and Truffle duo, in my opinion, has a mismatched color story. Truffle is this gorgeous, warm leaning bronzer contour hybrid, which I love. But then you've got Tulle, that cooler pink blush, and I'm not sure if it's going to be everyone's cup of tea, especially if you really love that consistent warmth. Actually, when I think about the Westman Atelier duo in Sable and Suede, that one makes way more sense to me in terms of versatility. Those two shades complement each other beautifully. Again, These are just my personal preference. You guys let me know what you think. Which one do you prefer? Alright, next up, let's talk about the Hermès Silky Blush Powders. Now, if you've caught my last unboxing video, you already know that this isn't just about the blush itself, it's the whole experience. The packaging, absolutely stunning. That white and gold compact oozes luxury. I also appreciate that satisfying click of a magnetic closure. However, I would like to mention that the compact itself is actually plastic. Still gorgeous, but plastic nonetheless. It is marketed as silky blush powder, and when I touch this, it feels so smooth and finely milled. It's not one of those blushes that punches you in the face with the color right away. Instead, it's beautifully buildable. You can sweep on a delicate, natural flush for everyday or layer it up if you want a bit more It blends easily without any harsh lines. Now, the shades I picked up are just divine. I love the shade Rose Tan. It is a peachy pink with bronzy undertones, so it complements my skin tone. If you're lighter than I am, this is going to be a great bronzer shade for you. Rose Ombre is dusty rose. In my experience, it is a little bit cool tone, but since it's not very pigmented blush, I can easily wear this and it doesn't look ashy. I enjoy both the shades, but I think if you have fair to medium skin tones, you will enjoy Rose Ombre a lot. These blushes have this semi matte finish with just the slightest hint of luminosity. It makes you look healthy. These blushes instantly remind me of the Guerlain Terracotta blush. They both have that buildable pigmentation and the silky, finely milled texture. You get that effortless blend with both. However, the Hermes leans a touch more matte with that very subtle radiance, while Guerlain Terracotta Blush has a slightly more noticeable luminosity. Also, the Hermes has that soft floral scent, while Guerlain has that signature strong perfume scent. If you are sensitive to fragrance, you might want to skip Guerlain. Also, I love the shade range of Hermes blushes. They have so many beautiful, natural looking options that really complement their overall aesthetic and line. I do feel that Guerlain could really expand their shade range. It feels a little more limited compared to what Hermes offers. So when it comes down to choosing between the Hermes and the Guerlain terracotta blushes, I think it really boils down to your personal preference and what you're looking for. If you're willing to splurge a little more, Hermes definitely offers a beautiful range of very natural looking shades, which I personally love. Plus, if you're sensitive to fragrance, the Hermes has a soft and subtle fragrance which is bearable. Now, if you're looking to achieve a similar, natural, healthy glow and don't want to spend quite as much, the Guerlain terracotta blushes are fantastic. Just keep in mind that they do have that signature, stronger perfume in their makeup. And the very last in this category is the Dolce & Gabbana Eyes and Cheeks Match Powder Blush. I love the packaging on this even more than Hermes. It looks chic and has some lovely weight to it. Now, the first thing that really strikes me about this formula is how incredibly creamy it is. Compared to all the other powder blushes I have talked so far, this one has the most luxurious, almost emollient feel. It just glides onto the skin beautifully. And the pigmentation is what I would describe as that perfect middle ground. It's not going to give you that super intense color right away, but it's not sheer either. It sets down to this gorgeous, natural finish on the skin, and there's this beautiful, subtle luminosity to it. It just catches the light in the most flattering way without being shimmery. I was quite surprised to know that it is fragrance free. I mean, most of the luxury brand makeup I've tried has a fragrance, so I am pleasantly surprised. In terms of the texture and the way it applies on the skin, Dolce & Gabbana blush reminds me a lot of the House Lab blushes. The only difference I can tell is that House Lab blushes are slightly more pigmented, so you get a bit more color payoff with a similar creamy feel. Both the Dolce & Gabbana blush and the House Lab blushes seems to be formulated without talc, which is great. Plus, for those of you who are sensitive to fragrance, both of these are fragrance free. I have to say that both the blushes are fantastic options. So if the Dolce& and Gabbana price point makes your wallet a little nervous, the House Labs blushes are definitely an amazing alternative. All right, before we move on to the next category, if you're enjoying this video so far and finding these comparisons helpful, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you enjoy these detailed makeup reviews and comparisons, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my future uploads. I promise I have a lot more fun videos planned for you all. So the next category is cream to powder blushes. And in here, we have the Rare Beauty Matte Bouncy Blush. The texture of these is quite unique. When you first touch the surface, there is a noticeable firmness. So I thought I will have some trouble getting the product on brush. But the product pickup is fantastic no matter what tool you are using. You can use your fingers, stippling brush, dancer brush, even a mini sponge. All works fine. They glide on and blend onto the skin the same way as you expect from a cream blush. But then they set down to a powder finish. It gives this wonderful smoothing and soft focus effect on the skin. In terms of wear time, I was genuinely impressed. Even after a full day, I noticed only minimal fading, which is fantastic. It's rare beauty, so we know that it's going to be very pigmented. Thankfully, while they pack a punch, they're not quite as intensely pigmented as their liquid blushes. I can make them work, but I would still advise you to be a little cautious. The texture of these reminds me a lot of the MAC Glow Play blushes. MAC's formula feels a touch more silky, and perhaps because they aren't as highly pigmented as Rare Beauty, they blend out even a little more seamlessly. If you love this cream to powder texture but you prefer a luminous finish, MAC would likely be a better option as the Rare Beauty blushes sets to a natural matte finish. I feel similarly about the Chanel cream to powder blushes as well. They also offer a less intense pigmentation compared to Rare Beauty and settle into a luminous finish. So if you're curious about experiencing the cream to powder formula without committing to the higher price point of Chanel, Rare Beauty is a really accessible alternative. Personally, I find the shade range of MAC Glow Play particularly appealing as they offer a great selection of those everyday, nude, natural looking shade if that's also your preference. Moving on to the next category, let's talk about baked formulas. And in this realm, I have the Say Super Sweet powder blushes. Right off the bat, while the packaging is minimal, I have to say it feels a little flimsy and surprisingly tricky to open at times. I don't mind simple packaging at all. Look at Tower 28 and Rare Beauty blushes, for example. They might not have the most glamorous packaging, but at least they feel sturdy. Anyways, being baked blushes, they have that lovely, silky, almost soft to the touch feel when you swirl your fingers in the pan. However, the experience changes when you go in with a brush. There's quite a bit of a fallout, so you absolutely need to approach these with a very light hand and a fluffy brush. I've also found out that they tend to go on patchy and become quite difficult to blend out evenly. That high pigment load combined with the shimmer seems to make blending a bit of a challenge. It's such a shame because I genuinely love both the shades I picked up. Chow is right up my alley. It's that perfect bronzer type of shade, a beautiful terracotta that just nails that sunburnt warm look. The other shade I got is Amore, which is a really vibrant, almost electric pink. It's definitely bright, but I was happy to find that it doesn't look ashy on my skin, which can sometimes be a concern with bolder pinks. Of course, if you have cooler undertones, this blush will likely complement you even more than it does on me. Overall, while I adore the colors I got, I am left feeling a bit underwhelmed. I'm a big fan of Say liquid blushes, so I had very high expectations from these, and unfortunately, they didn't quite deliver. I can honestly get a similar effect from a drugstore brand like Milani. At least the Milani blushes are easier to work with than these Say blushes. I do appreciate that Milani blushes have a subtle shimmer that gives a really lovely luminous finish to the cheeks. And if I'm willing to spend a little more, I would definitely reach for my MAC mineralized powder blushes. They also have a baked formula, and I love the beautiful shades I have from MAC. My favorite for years have been shade Warm Soul. It adds this beautiful golden peach flush that's incredibly flattering, and the shimmer in it isn't overpowering at all. Plus, you can even find amazing baked blushes right at Sephora. The Kosas baked blushes are far more user friendly than the ones from Say, in my opinion. I like the packaging on those, and surprisingly, the Kosas blushes have this wonderful creaminess to them that I haven't noticed in many other baked formulas that I have tried. These blushes can definitely pack a punch if you want them to, but you have so much more control with the Kosas compared to the Say. So, yeah, overall, I'm a little underwhelmed by these Say Super Suede blushes. I will continue to use the shades that I have because, well, I bought them, but I don't think you necessarily need to rush out and purchase these immediately. And the last category of blushes in today's video is unique formula. Remember, these are not new launches, but I think they deserve a little more love. First in this category is the RMS Redimension Hydra Powder Blush. What makes them so special is that they have a unique gel to powder formula. When I touch it in the pan, it feels silky, almost velvety, but it also feels a little moist to the touch. It is difficult to describe. It is still a powder blush, but I think it is that gel formula that feels hydrating on the skin. They blend out easily with any type of brush you prefer. And despite that initial creamy sensation, they set down to a beautiful, luminous powder finish that lasts without fading throughout the day. I love that lit from within glow that it adds to my cheeks. I also adore their versatility. You can use a light touch for a subtle radiance or build them effortlessly for more vibrant color, and they always blend seamlessly for a beautiful, healthy flush. I highly recommend them. Next in this category is the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Blushes. I know these blushes need no introduction. What makes these blushes unique is that Hourglass has fused blush pigment with one of their specialized finishing powders like dim light, ethereal light, or luminous light. So these blushes don't just add color to your cheeks, but it also imparts a soft focus, multi dimensional radiance. The finish isn't shimmery or glittery, it's more of a subtle, ethereal luminosity. I have two shades in my collection. Luminous Flush is described as a champagne rose shade. It is mixed with luminous light, which gives this beautiful candlelight glimmer to the cheeks. It's incredibly flattering without being overly pink or too warm. Then I also have Diffuse Heat, which is described as a vibrant poppy blush combined with the diffuse light powder. Now, in the pan, it might look a little intimidating, but on the skin, it transforms into a stunning coral pink with a subtle halo effect. It adds such a vibrant flush that really brightens up my complexion. I love how the diffuse light powder in this blush seems to soften the intensity of that poppy color, making it more wearable for me. I love these, and I think they're quite forgiving and easy to work with because the ambient lighting powders help to diffuse the color beautifully. Moving on, I wanted to give a shout out to the Chantecaille Sunstone Radiant Blush, specifically in the shade Confidence. This was a limited edition release, and I picked it up almost a year ago. But I'm surprised to see it's still available at many retailers. So I wanted to talk about it in this video. It has this really unique pearlescent gel powder formula. It is supposed to add a beautiful flush, enhances your own skin while still adding some color and radiance to your complexion. I noticed that this gel formula has a translucent quality to it that makes it look skin like and super easy to wear. I very much appreciate that the shimmer in this blush isn't too obvious on my cheeks. It doesn't accentuate any skin texture but still gives a lovely luminosity. If you're wondering how these compare to the RMS blushes. In my experience, both of them provide a different kind of glow. RMS blushes have a more noticeable, almost glossy sheen to them. It could be because the formula has a little bit of that wet feeling to it, so it adds a bit of a dewy sheen to my skin, while the Chantecaille is more of a soft, diffuse luminosity. The RMS ones also tend to have more pigment payoff in one go. The Chantecaille Sunstone is sheerer and more about building up that subtle radiance. I think you cannot go wrong with either one of these blushes. But to make it a little simpler for you guys to decide, if you prefer a more dewy look, go for RMS. But if you like a more understated, skin like glow, go for Chantecaille. As much as I love the Chantecaille formula, I will be honest that I am disappointed by the cheap feeling, plasticky packaging of this compact. This retails for $75. And as much as I love the formula, I am very underwhelmed by this cheap packaging choice that Chantecaille made with this collection. But I have a very comparable dupe for these Chantecaille blushes. It's the Clinique Cheek Pop blushes. In my humble opinion, these blushes from Clinique deserves way more hype than even their Black Honey lipstick. These retails for $30, and I think the packaging is far better than Chantecaille, and the formula is very similar. For this review, I even wore them side by side, and I couldn't tell any difference. You have a lot of beautiful shades to choose from, and they last all day on me. I highly recommend them if you don't want to spend $70 on Chantecaille blushes. And the last blush in this category that you've heard me rave about a lot is the Valentino Eye to Cheek blushes. These are hands down the creamiest powder blushes in my collection. They're even creamier than the House Labs or the Dolce & Gabbana blushes. I think these blushes are designed for people who love their cream formulas and tend to stay away from powders. These blushes are the perfect middle ground. You get that smooth, blendable application and that natural, skin like finish that you often get with creams, but without the potential stickiness or the extra blending time that some cream formulas require. It really feels like applying a very lightweight, velvety cream, but it dries down to a powder finish. I love shade 4. It is described as a warm rose shade, but I feel like it has balanced undertones. It doesn't look too warm on my complexion, and I think it will suit a variety of skin tones. Shade 8 is a soft pink, but it has a touch of a coral in it that adds a brightening effect to the skin. It has a little more shimmer in it than shade 4, but shimmer in this type of formula is very forgiving on the cheeks in my experience. It doesn't accentuate any texture. Alright, that wraps up today's video. I'm curious, what blushes are your absolute favorites? Have you tried any of the ones I've mentioned? Let me know in the comments below. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe and stick around for more. Until then, stay healthy, stay beautiful, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.